I'm Louis Siegel, this is my wife Lauren, and Louis Schanker died in 1981. And since 1981, we've been putting together stuff. And it's amazing how we constantly find new stuff, new things, new stuff. And in addition to the ephemera and the stuff that we have, the internet is like crazy. Every day there's new things being added that weren't there the day before. So we find more and more things. And for this show, these books, I mean, it's amazing what we were able to come up to from the local papers and things out here in Hamptons and Sag Harbor and so on. And things we didn't know about and so on, we were able to add to. So at any rate, this is Lou and Libby that we remember. The top one is at their house on Further Lane, and that's Libby's spot. Okay, she sat on the couch there, and that was her favorite spot. She sat and she did the New York Times crossword puzzle and whipped it off in a minute. She's very bright, very strong, very determined person, and Lou and she really complemented each other. They really were a great match together. And even though they both had other spouses at one time or another, I really think that their relationship was the relationship of their lives and so on. We were fortunate enough to be there and participate with them and see them. And it was as one of my cousins said, he put a little excitement into our lives. So this is them at the house, and then this is Lou and a friend of his, Larry Abelman. Ida Abelman is also a WPA artist. I don't know if you know that name. She lives in Sag Harbor, and her daughter still lives there now. So Larry and Lou owned this 14-foot rowboat that we had on two stakes at Long Wharf in Sag Harbor, And once in a while a big boat would come in, but not like you have it now, the enormous boats. It was right across from where the new windmill park is, that little windmill. And you could see there's Libby fishing, looking just like Libby, with her glasses on, and she smoked something, Camels or Chesterfields, and she always used an extension on it, a filter on it. And he smoked smelly Colombo cigars. So that's us, and that's me on the right there with my hair. So that's my shoulder and my hair. So this is when it all started. On the left, that's me in 1950 from my first kayak ride, and with my fishing rod in hand. And that's what Lou gave me. He didn't give me any art information. He didn't pass on any art information. But he definitely passed on a love for the outdoors and nature and sailing. And on the right is me taking Lou out on my folding kayak 25 years after that, in 1971. And also off Long Beach in Sag Harbor. This is Lou in his teens, his early teens. He grew up in the Bronx in a religious home. And he went through the 8th grade. There were some farms up in the Bronx that he worked on. He worked with animals and did some things. And when he was 14, 1917, was World War I. And he went right down and tried to enroll and enlist. When unfortunately he started 14 years old and they sent him off. And then a few months after that, he left home and took a cold water flat in the city. And he and the Sawyer brothers and Adolf Gottlieb all were together in this studio. I'm not sure if they lived in the studio or they used the studio as to do their work in the art studio, but it was definitely, according to a cold water flat, a walk-up cold water flat. And they did that for a couple of years, and what he did was he went to Cooper Union, had free classes at night. So he worked during the day as a soda jerk and doing other various jobs. He always worked. He was either doing artwork later on or working, going to school, but he always was very diligent in doing something. At some point he talks about, some of the clubs and some of the movements that he didn't participate in because he was working all the time. And he did what any red-blooded American kid does. He left and went and joined the circus. Okay, and he traveled cross country for a year or more with the Spark Circus, which evidently was one of the not bigger, but a very popular and successful circus that lasted for a number of years. And he traveled up to Maine and then cross country across the South out to the Midwest. And in the Midwest, he joined, the upper picture is he joined a threshing team. And what this was is they would go from farm to farm with specialized equipment for threshing the wheat, cutting the wheat, and so on. Evidently, the farmers didn't have this kind of equipment, so different teams would come and do it, like the pickers. And then for a while, he hit the rails and was a hobo and traveled on the rails. He worked sometimes on the rails, supposedly, in some of the things that we've read, but he also just bummed around as a hobo and saw the sights over the years. And then on the way back, he encountered the Great Lakes. So for a number of years, he worked on or months, whatever, worked on the Great Lakes steamer for a while. So he was involved with horses a lot. He worked with horses in the circus, and he worked obviously on this threshing team over here, working with horses. And he worked with mechanics on the steamships and so on.
Really?
Yeah.
Was he behind the scenes of the circus, or was he...
Behind the scenes. He worked with the horses and the elephants, cleaning up and setting up the tents and breaking everything down.
And about how old was he?
In 1920, he was born in 1903, so he was like 17 years old. He left home at 16, 17 years old. And from 17 to like 20, 21, he was traveling across the country. Interesting. Yeah. And all the time he was drawing, doing sketches and drawings and so on. And then he came back to New York and got another cold water flat and went to school at the Educational Alliance and Cooper, because they had classes during the day. And Cooper Union had classes at night, and also the Art Students League. So he was taking classes and working and drawing. And he did that for about painting. And he also did sculpture during this period. There's one story about a woman who came and commissioned the sculpture of a son that he did. And so he was doing very classical kind of work at this time. And this is his niece, my cousin Shirley, which is like 5 years old. And this actually got in the Times, the picture. It was in the show, and they picked it. And it was the first one of his pictures that was shown in the newspaper, so that was like a really big thing. And then he got on a boat and went to Europe because he was hanging around too long in Brooklyn and Manhattan, okay? And I'm not sure which one of these people, but I think that one of them is Bolotowski. But I'm not sure, okay? Because he went with Bolotowski. And I'm not sure who these people are. For some reason I thought it was this, but I really don't know. No. Yeah, because on the back of the picture it said Bolotowski. Maybe he took it. I don't know. Yeah, that's why he's not. And this is, judging by the roof over here, this might have been in France or Spain or something like that. You know, it's not a typical United States East Coast construction. And he did the same thing. He went to the restaurants and drew pictures, and La Dome was a very prominent restaurant at the time, okay, and he drew pictures of the rivers and became influenced by the other artists that were there, and of course things started to change, and he started to swing over from realistic to abstract. And the square heads was one of the things which is very prominent in a lot of work that he does. And the still lifes went from the other one to this one, the former one to this one.
So what date was that in?
This was in the 30s. This one he came back in the 30s. He went to Europe around 1930 to 32, and this would be in the 30s. He was doing this kind of stuff when he came back. And when he came back, he joined some groups in the early 30s. The 10 was the major group that he joined, which I'll talk about in a second. And this is this Marshall Langren, who was another artist. He also wrote a book. He was a historian. And it was at the Corcoran Gallery, but I just tried to look it up and see where it is. I can't see where it is now because they spread out they dispersed all the collection. And I actually had to I tried to call the people there and couldn't get a response. I had a feeling that their numbers they're not using their numbers anymore. But it was at the Corcoran. And just 4 years ago, I had a whole correspondence with them about permission to use it in a catalog or something. And he was very interested throughout his life in teaching and passing on the information that he had, especially with the prints. This is a mural class that he was teaching, but also the prints. The prints that he was doing were very unusual. The color woodcuts that he was doing were very unusual, and a lot of people didn't believe that they were actually woodcuts. They thought they were painted in, like Polo over there. And he convinced people that it really was like 16 different blocks to produce that image. And when the WPA started, and here it's down 33 to 43. I think 33 is a little bit early.
Well, 33 would be the public works of art.
Right.
Yeah, but it was a 2-year stretch.
Right. So and initially he wasn't really eligible because he was selling a lot of his pictures. So I think Gottlieb also was never in the WPA because he was selling at the time. But he got in first as a teacher and then eventually in the graphics division, and for a time he was a supervisor in the graphics division. And then he also did prints also. And these are some of the color prints that he did at that time or a little bit later. And you can see that this one, the horses one, is very similar to the polo one that's on the
And that one down on the lower right?
And the one on the lower right is a lithograph.
That's in our collection. Not the Pollock-Krasner House.
Oh, yeah, right. So that was a lithograph. That was part of a series, actually, part of a group of pictures. Yeah. And this is black and white polo. And this is my favorite out of all of this stuff. It's not that clear, but it's called Cafe. And that's the block of the Cafe. And so then he was doing murals, and the first commission he had was for the Neponset Beach Hospital, and the drawing, I think, is behind the screen. And this is the study for it, and you can see it was clowns. He was in the circus, so clowns and the animals. There were seals and elephants and giraffes and so on in a series of 11 murals that he set up for the show. And throughout his career, he concentrated on sports, clowns, and I'm having sports, clowns, music, and a lot of different sports events also. But here you can see the clowns playing music. And this is what the room looked like. So this is the dining room at a kid's hospital. And look at the tablecloths, okay? They had cotton tablecloths, and they had it looks like live flowers. And this was on the beach in the Rockaways, if you know where Reese Park is. That's where it was, around in that area. And I was a science jam person at Beach Channel High School, and I spoke to him on the phone, and he said to me, why don't you go over there, see if they have my pictures, So I made a bunch of calls and so on, and finally reached the right guy who assured me that they were nowhere around in the building. They had looked, the basement was flooded. I couldn't go in there because it was a health hazard. At the time, the building was already, it was in the 70s, the building was already closed and so on. And he had no idea where the pictures were. But these pictures are done on canvas, so they're not done on the wall. So somewhere they're out there, hopefully. And they weren't just destroyed. So this is the actual picture. The other one was the study for it. This is the actual picture for it. And just look at the horn and the drum and the flute, and then look at this. And you can see, like a lot of times people look at abstract work and they say, it's just a bunch of lines or something like that. But it's their vision of reality, And this was one and this was another one. And you can see that they all have the same major elements in them. And there's actually a third clown picture that I didn't include here. So it was it always amazed me that what he did was so deliberate. Because a lot of even the very abstract things, there's several different versions of them. So it was very, very deliberate in what they were actually doing. And at the time, art was going through this period, as it always is going through different periods, where there was this big controversy about abstract versus realism, And the three other murals that were done for WPA, for WNYC, this is the WNYC mural. The three other ones that were done for the WNYC were all completely abstract, no realistic, recognizable forms at all. But this one was in the lobby, and the other one was in the studio. This one was in the lobby. It's about 30 feet long, and it had elements of realism, and you could see a harp, and you could see some of the other instruments. And this, really set everybody on fire. There were all these articles in the Times about realism versus abstractism, abstract painting, and so on. And it's if you do something realistic, that's one thing. If you do something abstract, that's one thing. But if you kind of mix the two together, so you have realism modified, that becomes really, really controversial. So it set off a whole thing about and it was a big thing that Burgo and Diller, the guy who was in charge of the group, pushed abstract work, And also Lee Krasner also had a mural that she did her study, but the mural was never actually done, something like that.
By the time she got around to doing it, it was 1941, and it was turned into a war service.
So they were friends at the time, And in one of Schanker's interviews, he says that Burgo and Diller was really great with pushing abstract art and so on. And one of the ones that he had a problem with was Pollock, getting his work approved. And this is the third commission that he had for the WPA. This is the World's Fair mural, which was in the Science Building. This is it here. This is another mural here. And you can see the size of it. And also, this one is also missing, right?
Yeah, that was the mom.
Yeah, I think the whole building was demolished. And Schanker really felt that the WPA had been very important. That is, not only for the artists, but also because it brought art to the people, which is murals too. And in addition to that, there were also classes that were taught and so on. And he felt that, if you read this, even years later, he taught at the New School for about 15 years, and then he taught at Bard. He was a professor at Bard for about 15 years or more. And he felt that a lot of it was an outgrowth of the WPA, that people, dentists and lawyers and doctors and so on, got interested in art, not necessarily to do it, but just an interest in it by the WPA, works as WPA. And again, this is what he did. He took clippings out of the newspaper, and did his version of reality. These was his sports things. One of the things that one of Helen's friends worked at the Federal Bank.
Oh, yeah, Federal Reserve.
Federal Reserve. Mm-hmm. And they have a beautiful carving that he did. It's like a frieze, a wooden relief that he did. And it was called Flight into Nowhere, which could mean anything. That was the actual name of it, Flight into Nowhere. But when we started corresponding years ago, I said to her, you do know that that's a football pass. Because I have the original picture that it came from, showing a guy like this throwing a football. But Flight into Nowhere sounds very ethereal. And this is the hockey that's up here also. And this was the kind of prints that he did. It was a technique of wet on wet, something that hadn't been done for many years. And he got a lot of notoriety for these prints that he had done, the color prints that he had done. And he was as we said, he was involved in several protest movements, as everybody was in the 30s, or many were in the 30s. And one group was the 10, which included Bolotowski and this guy named Roskowitz, who shortened his name to Roscoe, and Solomon and a few other guys. And they all showed together, and they all were trying to push abstract art in their own way. And one of the things they did is they protested the Whitney, and that the Whitney was showing too many realistic things and not showing enough abstract material. And then later on they participated in the Modern Museum protests, where they were protesting not only abstract but also American as opposed to European artists and so on. And this is something that they did. This was also one of Schanker's posters that they did for the Spanish children as the war was approaching, and Europe was in foment. And down here, this is Dictator's Dream, and with Hitler and Mussolini and so on coming to power, it was somehow related to that. At least I've read that it was. And this is the Cops and Pickets, and you can see this is the oil Cops and Pickets, which is a significant 36 by 29 oil, and this is the print. And again, you can see the same elements in both. Very frequently he did the oils first, and then he did the prints afterwards, which I always thought it would be the other way around, but very frequently that's what he did. And then he was involved with the American Abstract Artists. This is a poster for their first show, which is at the Squibb Galleries in 37. And this is the picture that you see here, and this is a Schanker sculpture here. And this three men on the bench is now at the Smithsonian. But it was a big 36-inch work that he did. And he was a member of the AAA right from the beginning, along with a lot of the abstract artists at the time. And he got a lot of recognition for the kind of work he was doing, especially those prints. Some of the ones that are here were in this show. And Una Johnson was a good friend and somebody who backed the works that he was doing. And in 1972, they produced a catalog of all of his prints also. But this was a show in 43. And again, he was getting recognition. He was on the cover of some of the magazines. This was the first issue of this magazine that was on a larger format. It was like a really big thing. I'm not sure how long it lasted. With this issue, it knew its program will continue the furtherance of all the American arts, bringing the American people the most advanced efforts of present-day painters, poets, musicians, interpretive artists. And this was in Vogue magazine, around 45, and that's the Pullman that's up there. And this was a show that was done at the Smithsonian in 48, and again, this was on the cover of Brooklyn Museum in the 50s. So he was teaching at the time and being very productive, especially with his woodcuts. He was doing some sculpture and oils at the time, and we have a whole series of templates that he did in the 40s. So he was very active, doing a lot of things in the 40s. So like a lot of the other folks, he came out to Long Island. He came out here, and Maidstone Park is an area near here, I think. I'm not sure. Yeah. So this is where he lived for a while. This is David Slivka. It's really funny because this is one of the things that we found. We put it in these books, and then the opening night, Gail Levin was here. She's flipping through the book, and the second page in the book is this article she wrote in 1982? 2010. And which was pretty funny, actually. So you can see the names: Pollock-Krasner Brooks, Elaine de Cooney, so on, George Capon. And basically, the reason we found it interesting is this Slipka had bought Lou's 32 DeSoto car, and Jackson both wanted to ride Davis DeSoto, which they called his surrealist car, since its upholstery was falling apart. I'm sure when Lou had it, it was in perfect condition. So at the time, Lou left his whatever he had over here and bought this house. First he lived in it for a year or two, and then he bought it. And the woman he bought it from, her name was Smith, and she was a piano teacher, I think. And I'm not sure exactly what happened, but I know that while we were here, this 90-year-old woman was living upstairs, up these steps. So I think he bought it from her, but then she lived in the house until she passed on. And she lived in this section. We would go up to the second floor, and there was a locked door. And this area is where the kitchen was. And in another picture, you'll see there's a large studio back here that Lou used. And this is the porch that was around the house. It was on Marsden Street in Madison, if you know Sag Harbor. And this is me. And this is Shirley, that little girl that was in that picture. And this is her mother and my mother-in-law. And one of the greatest memories that I have is riding on my bike from the Marsden Street. Runs from the high school right down into this driveway. And I would go on my bike and trudge up to the top of this hill and then ride straight down. So a month ago we took my car, we did the same thing. It's like really, with this cousin, with this boy over here. So he and I, let me just explain, he and I used to come out, this was the whole family was out, from Brooklyn. We lived in Siegel in Brooklyn. And the whole family would come out sometimes. But then as we got older, he and I would come out and spend 2 or 3 weeks here in August with Lou and Libby with her. And one of the first things he did was tear down this porch. And he tore it down by having my brother, who was 5 years older, and a cousin of mine who was 5 years older. That's it over there in the corner. And he had them tear down the porch, but he kept all the posts. And he, over the next few years, he was into something called circle image, where he was drawing circles on flat oil and print. And his sculpture, I think it was a three-dimensional realization of this circle image also. So he had these little balls inside the post itself, carved inside the post, so they really can't come out. It was a very interesting thing he did. Norton Mockridge, I don't know if you remember, used to be the second section of the World Telegram and Sun on the bottom. He had a column. I don't know why I remember that. So this was one of the things that he wrote about. People who were afraid to have Schanker over. And things were really different then. This was the Sag Harbor paper, and they used to list all these things, like Schanker left his home after the weekend. It's like, hello, my house is empty for the next 5 days. I mean, it's like really crazy. This is the kind of stuff that's in here. This is what we found when we were looking through these things. It was kind of interesting. And they would say that they had a party for the weekend or something like that, but then they would say they left. Or they're away for 3 weeks. Something you really couldn't do. So in the 50s, again, he participated in all of these shows that were out here, at Guildhall and some of the other places, some of the other galleries that were out here. Ray Prohaska is another name that we know, Ralph Carpentier. So this was 54, 58, And at the same time, he was still teaching in the city. And he would go up to Bard for 2 or 3 days a week to teach. And he was teaching at the New School in the city. This is a catalog from the New School. They did these really nice catalogs every year. And this was 57 or something like that. But while he was teaching there at the New School, one of his students felt that he ought to meet a friend of hers, Libby Holman. So she introduced Lou to Libby. And Lou had absolutely no idea who she was. Okay? These are 3 books that were written about her. They're all terrible. Okay? And the worst one is, just ask my wife, she'll tell you if you have an extra 2 hours. But the worst one is this John Bradshaw. And at the time when it came out, it was panned. It was just delicious. Not true and salacious material and trying to just sell books based upon whatever scandals he could make up and put into the books. And it was not the Libby Holman we knew and the Libby Holman that before we knew her also. So we just wanted to put that in. Don't ever read that book. But if you read it, just take it with a grain of salt. So this was Libby. And she was born in 1904, Lou was born in 1903, so they really were about the same age. She lived in Cincinnati. She graduated from high school early, graduated college at 19. Okay? And she was supposed to be a lawyer and do all sorts of things. And instead she decided to take a year off and go and try acting. And of course she never went back to anything else. And one of her claims to fame is she supposedly invented the strapless evening gown. I know nothing. So these are some of the shows that she was in and some of the songs that she sang. And some of the songs that she sang were very risque or whatever at the time. So she was like a torch singer. That was the moniker that they put on her. So Can't We Be Friends, Moaning Low, Body and Soul, Something to Pretend to Be Blind are all songs that have been copied by other people over the years, but she had introduced them in these shows. And this is Fred Allen and Clifton Webb were two of her good friends for the rest of her life. And she was just a fantastic person. She was so bright and talented. And what was that?
I've just seen Max Gordon from the Vanguard.
So, and she knew everybody, you know. And then while she was on Broadway, and then she was traveling around the shows, and she met this guy and married him. A couple of years younger than her, and they moved down to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, because he was the son of R.J. Reynolds. And they were married for about a year, and then he committed suicide. Okay. And for a while there was talk of putting her on trial for it and stuff, but he committed suicide. The charges were dismissed, and she was pregnant. So in 1932 or 33, she had Christopher Reynolds, her son, and she was devoted to him over the years. And she ended up buying this Treetops, which we talked about, which is in Stamford, Connecticut. And this is where the pool was, even though your cousin took it away. Okay. And many great times out in the pool. And in the basement over here, there's a large playroom down in the basement. Large playroom.
The pool is just up the hill over there.
Yeah. So it's where the tennis courts were up here. Yeah. And this is the dining room, this is the living room area, this is the library over here. And this is the garage. And she had all of these people there. Imogene Coca, Tallulah Bankhead, Martha Ray, they were all friends. Roddy McDowell, I met him once. And there's a story my wife tells about Elizabeth Taylor as we were there once. And she went to sit down in the library, and Libby said, "Oh, wait a minute," and it was Elizabeth Taylor's gloves, because who was it? Richard Burton had given her a ring, and the gloves, he couldn't put the gloves on again because the ring was so big. Something like that.
She left again. I was sitting down on the gloves because he was so that was.
And so while she was doing this, and she had that whole life, there was a whole other part to her. In the 1940s, she got very involved in folk songs and the Lomax tapes, which were done of the folk singers, the black and rural hillbilly folk singers of the South. And she worked with Josh White, who was well known at the time, in putting together a whole group of songs based upon that, and on Sojourner Truth songs and so on. The only problem was that he was black and she was white, and a lot of the places they went, he had to go in the back door and she went in the front. She was enraged by that, and there's all these stories about crazy things she did because of that. And they tried, it was during the war, and they tried to entertain the troops, and they wouldn't let them entertain the troops because it was a mixed group. So they were only entertain the black troops. And she was very involved in civil rights and the civil rights movement. And not just doing things like this, but also, hands-on kind of things she did. And then there was this guy, Martin Luther King, that she heard about. And later on in the 50s, she supported him. He wanted to go to India to study Gandhi, So she ended up paying for that trip. They had tried to do it. They didn't have enough money, and she ended up paying for the trip. And when she finally met Martin Luther King, she went over to him and said, you're my inspiration. He said, no, you're my inspiration, because she had been doing this since the 40s. And this was the publicity for the show. It was called Blues Ballads and Sin Songs that she was doing at the time. This was in the 50s. So this is what she was doing when she met Schanker and got married. And this is the library of Treetops. And that's me. Okay, she wasn't there yet, because I was 14 then. I met her when I was 15. And that's my mother. And that's Lou and Libby, Lou's sister. And it was great. They both enjoyed family. Family was very important to Lou, and it was very important to Libby also, because her family wasn't really around. She had the son who was born around 1932 or something, and she had two other adopted sons that she adopted when she had a short marriage in the 1940s, around 1945. And the two boys were about my age. They around the same age that I was. One was born 45, one was born 47. And they were away at school a lot and so on. And her family was in Cincinnati and other parts of the world. There were very few people that were around here. So family was very important to both of them, very important to her. And this is some pictures and paperwork from Martin Luther King. And you'll see later on that Libby and Lou did some fundraising events for Coretta after King's passing. So this is the house in Sag Harbor. This is the porch that they took down. And this is what it looks like now. I don't want you to think that this is what it looked like when Lou, they changed it, they painted it up a little bit. It was a little bit better than this. But it wasn't like this. This was a month ago, what it looked like, okay? And you can see it's the same. They added two wings on either side that weren't there. I mean, I didn't go in or whatever. But you can see, look at the windows here. You know, the windows up here. And here's the same windows with the same shutters and the same struts, the same supports. This is the back of the house. This is the front of it. But you can see it's the exact same house. You know. So it was a really great house. And Libby and Lou moved in there in the summers of 59 and 60 and 61 when they got married. But there are a lot of people there. Like this guy. You know who this is? This is Montgomery Cliff. Okay. And this is Libby. This is David Holman, our nephew. This is Lou. And this is Montgomery Cliff. And this was after, I don't know how many of you know about it, he was an actor, he was a James Dean kind of character, and he had an accident. And this was after his accident. And this was at Treetops, actually. This was the back porch at Treetops. Because this is me, and this is my cousins. And we were like too young. They were afraid for us to take the train out to East Hampton. So instead they put us on a train to Stamford, which was a little shorter, you know, and more direct. And we spent like a week at Treetops, and then we all went by caravan out to Sag Harbor. And then we took like 4 cars with the staff and so on out to Sag Harbor. And flowers. Every week that Libby was out here, she had flowers delivered from Treetops, live flowers. And the significant thing about this was after his accident. It was we played tennis with him, Lou and we played tennis with him. That was the first time he had done any activity, and we played tennis and so on. The other really great story is, so this is my cousin Jay, who's this precocious 12-year-old, about like me, a real adult at 14. But one day we were in the Sag House, and Monty was there, and he said to Jay, "Come on over here, kid. You know, come here, and do me a favor, read this to me, okay?" And he had no idea what he was reading, you know. But he was reading, and the other guy was reading, and so on. And it was something about a trial. And it was the trials at Nuremberg script, okay, which came out in 61 and 62. This was 59. So here was this 12-year-old reading the script to him and having him practice the script. It was like a really cool story. The other thing that we did that Libby did in the Sag Harbor house is she practiced there. Okay, she worked with Gerald Cook after Josh White. She worked with Gerald Cook for whatever 20 years or so, and put together her shows. And they would come and they would practice this. The bottom line is there wasn't enough room in Sag Harbor for everybody. So they looked around for other houses, and I distinctly remember going with them to probably a dozen houses on Shelter Island. One day we went looking around at all these houses on Shelter Island. But what they ended up is with this house on Further Lane, which was built by this architect, Robert Rosenberg. And this was a house. It was essentially one big room. The bedroom was over here, and there was a curtain, and there was a living room, dining room area, and this was a counter, and that was the kitchen. And there was a bathroom and a shower. So it was essentially one big room, all glass, except for this one wall over here and the wall in the kitchen. Everything else was glass. And it looked out onto the dunes, onto the Atlantic Ocean. It was on the secondary dunes. It was really beautiful. Oh, this is the counter in the kitchen. And this is looking out from this window over here. And they loved the house. Rosenberg had built it originally for himself. There was no electricity in it when he lived there with his wife and kids, I think. And Libby and Lou bought it and upgraded it. And it was in Weekend Utopia, this book. And this is the view. And one of the cats, two of the cats actually. And this is the view. This is the Atlantic Ocean. This is the dune. Really beautiful spot, high above the dunes. And this is the house when they were in it. And this is the way they redecorated. And they had these low platforms and these beach chairs essentially on the platforms and these tables, two tables here that we used to eat on, put them together. This is the fireplace, which is over here. And this is one of Lou's print blocks. It's an 8-foot print block. And this is a picture of Libby that Lou did before. Yeah, they used to have tours. They used to have tours, and Gottlieb also did it. And not only did he open the house, but he also opened up a studio. And they had lots and lots of parties there. As Helen will tell you, she went to all of them. And the cover of our book has one picture of one of the beach parties down at 2 Mile Hollow Beach, right down by their house, right in front of the house. So, but this is, you can see that this was right in the center of the house, and this is where she entertained and spoke to people. And on a Sunday morning, she'd be doing the New York Times crossword puzzle and working out the schedule for the day and what was going on and where everybody would be going. And very frequently she'd say, "Where do you want to go, Flo?" And Flo would look at her and say, "I don't know." But she was great that way. She was, there are two kinds of people. There's people that you walk into a room and they're the center of attention, but she made you feel like you were the center.
I was always the one who didn't care, so I was quiet in the corner. So she said, "I want you to decide where to go, because you never decide where to go." Okay.
And this is one of the articles that we found. It was in 67 East Hampton. This guy, Arthur Ross, is a great writer. And it's just a great article. It gives a real feeling of what Libby was like. He came in, she asked him, gave a tour of her plants and around the house. She asked about how his wife was, his mother. She invited his mother to come in. It's a very interesting article. But at the end, I thanked Libby Holman for the interview. She then presented me with her latest record, which she obligingly autographed. It was raining outside, so she appeared with an umbrella and walked him out with it. I mean, that's the kind of person she was. She took the umbrella and walked. She didn't want it to get wet and walked out with the umbrella. But she was really a great person. So they had a lot of parties, and they did a lot of entertaining there, and they had a lot of people visiting them. At some point or another, they were interested in Zen meditation. She was looking for answers. The 60s were wonderful because they were married and everything was going great, all these things that we're going to show you, and yet there was a lot of really troubled things in her life also. And this is one of the things. And you can see straight through the house. This is the front of the house, and you can see straight through to the Atlantic Ocean. And when Rosenberg was there was a piano there. Because Helen found a picture of a girl sitting at a piano right there. So these were some of the things, he was involved in in Sag Harbor and East Hampton while he was still doing shows and things in the city, but for the 6 months that he was out here during the year, he was involved in things on the island. And this is Harold Rosenberg, who was a well-known critic and art critic. And this is the circle image pictures that he did, and the show that he was having out here at Bleecker Gallery on Newtown Lane. I don't think it exists anymore. No. Yeah. So these were his circle image phase pictures. And this was at the parish. He was in a couple of shows at the parish. And at the same time, Libby was doing her thing, She was doing this blues ballads and sing-songs show. And she did several benefits at Guildhall that were all sold out. And when she practiced, normally she'd drink Suave Bola wine. So she drank all the time. Drinking Snapple, she drank Suave Bola. Unless she was practicing, rehearsing, and then she drank tab. So you knew she had a tab in front of her that there was a show coming up, And if she had Suave Bola, you knew you were safe. So this is she did. I went once to a show at George Washington University. We flew down there to see a show. This was at the UNICEF concert at the UN. She did a couple of those. She did at the 92nd Street Y and so on. And this is a letter that my wife said I should put in there. I evidently wrote her a letter after watching her in a concert. And but it really gives a feeling not so much about what a great music critic I am, but what kind of person she was. And this was 65, so I was 19. It's just a really nice letter that she sent. And again, she was doing all of these concerts. This one was at Guildhall. This 167 of the North 67, both the same, right, in August. And this is Eli Wallach and Ann Jackson and Vincent Donahue, who I don't remember. And the other thing is, this is Libby at one of the concerts, and she was always wearing these pendants, which were Louis sculptures that she was wearing. And almost all the time you see her, she's wearing these sculptures, large and small sculptures. You know who this guy is, right? Yeah, John Lindsay, yeah. So she was they were politically active, She was very involved in the McCarthy campaign for president and so on. And this is her accompanist, Cook. Gerald Cook. Yeah. And I'm not sure who these people are. You don't know, right? It's like I should know who this is. He looks like so familiar. I don't know.
Looks like Jake Jack.
Like John?
I don't think so.
No. There's another picture we have, which I couldn't find, with Hershon and his wife standing there, and she sort of looks like Hershon's wife, but not. So this was in the Long Island Press. This, by the way, is called Cleopatra's Needle, and it's another one of these porch posts. It was done from one of these porch posts. And at the time, he started doing these things where he supposedly was inspired by a wreck on the East Hampton beach, and he pushed wood into a fireplace and burned it, and then fixed it so the charcoal wouldn't come off, and then carved these balls and also circles. And this is somebody, Lee Krasner, I don't know who she is. A show at Guildhall. Oh, Gerson Lee?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
It was the annual party that they tribute to the memorial.
That's great. And I think this was the same show. That's the East Hampton stuff. And this is the one that was in the house there, and it's a bronze, and it won first prize, and this is another one that was empty. And the really cool thing is, when he was doing a show in the city, it was up in 57th Street at the Dorsey Gallery, I think, And he invited the kids from the Lighthouse of the Blind to come in and move the balls, field the balls. He called them his fieldies. I think that's one of the articles that said that. And they were able to move the balls around and not get them to come out, so they were able to field the sculptures. And of course he participated in all the things, the baseball game, the Artisan Writers game, I think it's next week or something. You're going to be in there, right? And he also ran these, they also ran these fundraising events, and this is at the Further Lane House, the Dune House. And this was a fundraiser, and it's Libby and Lou, and somebody with a lot of funds, hopefully, and Coretta. And she didn't just come up by herself, she came up with the whole family, and this is Lou taking them out to Montauk, and it happened to be the end of August is Lou's birthday, so they celebrated his birthday together with him. And these are the kids now. I don't know which one's which. These are the two older ones. They're probably the two that are political active. I think one of them died recently in Chile. I'm not sure.
One of them won't give up the memorabilia.
Right. There's a controversy between, I think, the two older ones. I'm not sure. It may be, I don't know, about the memorabilia and so on. And this is a treetop. Downstairs in the room, a treetop. And these are pictures of Timmy and Tony, their two sons. And this is one of Lou's sculptures and one another. And this is the two of them on vacation. In the winter, what do? You can't go to East Hampton, you go something. They love the beach, they love to travel, they travel to the Caribbean very frequently. And they had a great life. Everything was wonderful. But in the background was her son had died. The one who was born in 1933 died in 1950 in an avalanche. Not an avalanche. She was rock climbing and fell during rock climbing. And that was a real turning point in her life. That was in 1950. Okay? But the 60s were like crazy. Her mother died. Her sister died. John F. Kennedy was killed. Martin Luther King was killed. Robert Kennedy was killed. McCarthy lost his bid for the election. All of these things happened. So in the background, while everything was going so wonderful, this was going on. And she felt very, very strongly about all these things. She was very bright, very involved, very with it, politically active kind of person. And she took all of this to heart. Twice she tried to commit suicide, and they found her and stopped her and whatever. And then the third time, she was successful. So in 1971, she committed suicide.
Those are the daffodils.
These are the daffodils, right? And this is outside the studio. The rocks outside the studio, and her ashes are spread on the hills. They're probably by these rocks also.
They didn't know that.
They didn't know.
They didn't know that.
The ashes. I read it in the paper.
But we've been, there many
Yeah, it's every spring. Every spring she was into plants. That article with Roth in the Hamptons where she talks about our plants there. And again, I only remembered it as I was talking now. Every week, the gardener would come from Stanford and deliver the flowers for the week, so we had fresh flowers. But the daffodils were a really big thing for her, and there's a daffodil named after her. And when you go there in the spring, there's these thousands and thousands of daffodils. And she would open up the campus to the public, and people would come and so on. And then the new owner did it once or twice, and then
Are they still living there?
Yeah. Some other place in the city. So this was Lou's birthday. Don't look at the way he's holding that now. But this was his birthday. This is Libby. This is Lou. And his birthday in 69 or 70. And she passed in 71. And these are two correspondences between Coretta and Lou afterwards. And they became, they remained friends.
Maybe Coretta also.
Huh?
Coretta ran a fundraiser for her in Atlanta. And she was a lovely person. She was a little formal.
Right.
Which is interesting, that she was...
That's like funny. But my daughter...
Our daughter worked at the 92nd Street Y.
Oh, yeah.
And one of her duties was she ran the concert and stuff like that. She was like social director. I don't know what she was. But, so there would be a speaker, and then afterwards there'd be wine and cheese, and she would run the whole thing. So she met all these different people. And Coretta was there once.
With a box.
With a book. The book had just come out. And here Bonnie is supposed to be ushering her, my daughter, is supposed to be ushering her through the whole group and everything like that. And she goes over there and gives her a dozen pictures, these pictures. So Coretta went crazy and went off in a corner, didn't participate. My daughter got in a lot of trouble over that one. So after Libby's death, Lou maintained a life. We said that when he died, we had 3 houses to clean up. He maintained a life estate in the Dune House on Sag Harbor. He sold in East Hampton. He sold the Sag Harbor house around 65, and by the way, associated with the house was like a bunk room for 5 people, where the staff stayed, or we stayed, or the sons, Timmy and Tony, stayed. It was separate from the main house. It's kind of interesting looking at what we do today. The staff stayed there, we stayed there. There was 1 bathroom outside, 1 shower, 1 bathroom outside for the 4 rooms that slept like 8 people.
There's 8 people that went
and it was outside. We had to walk outside to get to it. And this is Herman Cherry. I'm not sure who this is. This is Lou. This is Pool out the back. This is the Rolls. They had a 1960 Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud convertible with left-hand drive, which is a really unusual car. That was only 30 of them made, something like that. And we sold it for $80,000. At the time, it was a lot of money. But now, I'm sure it would be worth it. And the guy who bought it, sight unseen, called me up afterward and said, "Thank you so much. I love the car. It's wonderful." So I didn't get the money. And he was active. He played tennis with Herman Cherry every morning here at the courts in East Hampton. And he loved his car also. We went, he drove it all over. Timmy and Tony, the 2 sons, and I went out looking for girls in it a couple of times, and which was really cool. You didn't hear that, right? And but we went with Lou. I went collecting mussels. He says, "You want to go get mussels?" And I said, "Sure." And we put the waders and boots in the rolls and went to get mussels at the Morton Preserve in St. Paul. And as we were going over there, I said, "What kind of mussels are we going to get over here?" He says, "The mussels, the marsh mussels." I said, "You can't eat those." He said, "I'm 70, whatever years old. You're going to tell me we get them?" They weren't bad. I teach marine biology. And this is that mural that we were talking about that was done for the governor. And this is what the mural looked like. And again, some of the artists actually painted on the mural, and some of them brought their stuff and put it on it. And this is Lou's over here. And you can see this scribbling over here. That was de Kooning. And in this Times article, it describes, I think in your book, it describes de Kooning. Schanker was working for hours on this thing with all the guys and gals or whatever, and de Kooning walks in and scribbles something in the corner going onto Schanker's picture. And it became this big thing. They didn't know if they were going to have a fight or something or whatever, because he went into his space. And obviously they just left him. So this was this large mural that they put together. And then at night, it was, if you look over here, you look at this picture here. So at night, it was used as the backdrop for the show they did. This is Schanker in the show, whatever. Summer Frolic. Herman Cherry said it was instead of a baseball game. And then it's also WPIS. And these are some other shows. And this is Helen's book. And this is Larry Abelman, who was Ida Abelman's husband, a friend with the boats. They were 2 cool guys out on the beach, probably at the beach in front of the house at 2 Mile Hollow. And this is Dorothy Beskin, a friend of his, a photographer, and became a friend of his. And Regina Cherry was here at the opening. She's still yeah, and she doesn't remember taking a picture. And again, he was continued doing shows, and she continued doing shows. This one is at the Tower Gallery, which used to be in Sag Harbor, right on the corner, across the street from the old parish museum.
Southampton.
Yeah, Southampton. And I remember it very well because it was up on the second floor, and it was one of these little art galleries, and they wanted to serve wine and cheese, and the only place they could serve it and keep the stuff cold was the bathroom. So they had a counter, but there was no bathroom for 50 people, including me, who had to drive all the way back to... Were we married? Honey, I guess I had to drive back to people. We won't go into it any further. All right, at any rate. So this was this Tower Gallery show, which is in 76. And this is Peter Grippy. And this Dorothy Beskin's daughter, who was here, said that she has a video of him doing this sculpting. I'd love to know what the sculpture was. And we'll see. One of these days we can get it. We'll see the video. And this is the studio at Doom House in East Hampton. And right throughout his life, he did reprints of some of his prints and some of his older prints. This is one of the bosses that I know. And he was always experimenting. You know, on the webpage we have now 60 years of experimentation. He was always doing different stuff, making different prints, doing different carvings and different sculpture. And this is him. There's a plexiglass over here that he worked on. He scribed in it with a Dremel tool, or he put wax on it, and some of them he made prints from, and some of them he used the way they were. And this size over here was actually made to fit inside a light box with moving colored light behind it and so on. And so that's the studio. This is the front of the house on Doom Road. But they were two great people. We loved them. They really gave a lot of excitement to our lives. And don't read that book. What happened was Libby didn't want to be interviewed at that point in her life, especially with all these things that were going on. So she refused to be interviewed. And Schanker refused to be interviewed by him. And he threatened that he was going to write all these things because Schanker wouldn't interview and so on. And again, when the book came out, it was completely panned, you know. But unfortunately, it's become the Bible on Libby Holman. And when you read other things, a lot of it comes from that book.
What about the other two?
The other two are okay. You know, they're more... They use the brand. And the idea is to sell books. If you want to sell books, you talk about the shooting, the whatever, this, that, and the other thing, the sex and violence and whatever. But they were really, really great people. And I thank Helen and the staff for putting this together and having Lou come back since 1981. Okay. Well, I'm glad that you're able to do it, and that you have this connection, Treetop.
Yeah, that's
really funny. Yeah.
Such a small house.
Yeah.
That was awesome. Really Thanks. That's just good. Great.
Really looking to me.
Yeah, maybe we'll do something.